Welcome to Accountable, where your business is our business. Hosted by David R. Peters. Today's guest is Linda Newsom-McCurdy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, the podcast for CFOs by a CFO. I'm going to make a bold statement here to start our show today. The thing, in my opinion, the thing that is on the mind of CFOs and financial leaders right now is maintaining engagement, connectivity with stakeholders, with customers, with clients, maintaining that connection that really makes your business go. In a period like we've had, when we've been in the midst of the pandemic, where we can't do things like have in-person meetings, we can't do things like going out to clients' offices or having them come to our office, I think the number one issue is maintaining engagement with stakeholders. I think it's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge during normal times, but I think it's been more pronounced more lately. And I think that if you are working in a service-based business or really any business where the experience is really what you're selling, so maybe, for example, like the restaurant industry, it's not just about the food, it's about the experience of going and being in that place with the lighting and the things that are going on around you. That's part of what a restaurant sells. And I think if you're working in an industry, and there's more than just the restaurant industry, but if you're working in an industry where you're selling experience and live events, people being in the same area, I think that the last year or so has really been a challenge. I think that one organization that has had to confront this challenge is the state CPA societies. My guest today is Linda Newsom-McCurdy. She is the Senior Director of Learning at the Virginia Society of CPAs. So what she does is she helps the CPA Society in Virginia put on what has historically been live events, live learning opportunities. And over the past year, she hasn't been able to do that. So she hasn't been able to put on the events that they've had in quite the same way because we really haven't done anything in person. So she is a great person to talk to about this challenge that goes along with what do you do? How do you maintain engagement and this connection with the stakeholders of your organization when you can't see them, when you're not holding live events? How do you do that? How do you make that work? And I think that she's a great person to talk to about that challenge. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how the Virginia Society of CPAs has really dealt with this issue. What do you do when there's no live learning opportunities? One of the things that I love when I am teaching and speaking is when I go to an event, and maybe I've been at this event multiple times. Maybe it's the same conference, and I've been there multiple times. Part of the event, part of what I look forward to is not just the content, it's about seeing the people that are there. It's the camaraderie that goes along with going to that event. So what do you do when that's not there? Are there ways that you can maintain that camaraderie when we're not physically in the same space? And so that's what our conversation is going to be about today. My conversation with Linda is about how do you maintain that connectiveness. She's also going to talk a little bit about some of the changes that the CPA Society has made and how learning has really changed in this environment. So I think it's going to be a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. Enjoy my conversation with Linda Newsom-McCurdy. This week on Accountable, my guest, Linda Newsom-McCurdy. Welcome to Accountable, Linda.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you as well. So, Linda is the Senior Director of Learning at the Virginia Society of CPAs. Linda, what a year we've had. I think that's probably putting it lightly, nicely.
Very mild.
Very mild. And one of the things that I think a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses have really struggled with during this time of COVID is any business that has really sort of thrived on experience and sort of face-to-face interaction all of a sudden has been sort of without that. And the state CPA societies in Virginia and across the country, I think have really struggled to adapt, or at least maybe, have maybe had this issue of trying to deal with the idea of not having live events. What sort of challenges and maybe opportunities does not having live events really put forth for the CPA Society?
Yeah, so David, it's really interesting. The value proposition that the state societies bring to the table is not just that we advocate for our members, but we also are really good at connecting our members. And so when you're in a virtual environment, it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that. Another thing that really we have always thrived on is when we connect with our members, we're also able to talk to them and get a really firsthand sense of what it is that they're dealing with in their offices, what topics and what content they're really looking for because they can't find it someplace else, or they're really struggling with an issue. And so we use those face-to-face interactions to help us plan out what we can provide to our members. So it's been a challenge from going from all these live events to strictly online. And how do we really keep our members engaged with us? How do we really connect with them? How do we hear from them about what is most important to them? So it has opened up a whole new world to us at the same time as it shut the door to a few things as well. We have really the Virginia Society had positioned themselves a few years ago to offer virtual events alongside of our live events. But what it has opened up for us is the ability to look to other organizations in other states and look at their content as well to see how that might help our member.
Yeah, and you said a couple of really interesting things there. I think that are definitely I would just kind of want to pull from here a little bit because so the first thing is that it's not that the state societies were necessarily, and especially in Virginia. I mean, I've attended Virginia Society of CPA events for years. But it's not that they weren't ready or really caught flat-footed with, in terms of virtual learning. Virginia's been offering virtual learning for a long time, but I think that a lot of folks have chosen to go to the live events because of the things that you're talking about. It's about feeling a part of the accounting community, about feeling a part of the financial community in that particular area. One thing I joke about, kind of half joking, kind of half not, with a lot of folks at at the live events is that you say the same faces at the same places at the same time every single year.
Yeah, you do, and it becomes quite the community. I remember last year when we when the pandemic first hit, and we were a month out from one of our biggest events, our business and industry conference, and that conference has had some of the same people come to it for at least the 13 and a half years that I have been at the organization. Yeah. And I remember when I was making my welcome video, I could name 25 people that I would normally see and be able to connect with and talk to and, see how their world is going and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a big shift, but we have found some small ways to still connect with people. provide and to be able to glean from them the information that we need to really continue to plan for them as well.
So let's talk about that a little bit as well, because it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, it's I think a lot of times, and maybe this is just kind of the nature of people, I'm not really sure, but I think sometimes we kind of focus on the negative side of the fact that we can't have sort of in-person events. What opportunities do maybe we have with the fact that basically all learning, all CPA society events, they're online now?
So some of the opportunities that we have really seen over the last year is that, first off, a lot of our members, the travel part and the time away from the office was very hard for them. It was hard for them to get away for 2 days from their office, or really 3 days, because they would have to have travel time and overnight time and things like that. So we have seen more people attend our events that hadn't potentially come in the past, because they could come from anywhere.
Right.
In addition to that, we've been able to find speakers that we normally wouldn't be able to find because they couldn't fit us into their schedule. So we've been able to bring them in for an hour or for 2 hours, whereas before, an hour or a 2-hour session would have meant 2 days of travel, and that just wasn't possible for them. So we've been able to bring in experts that we normally wouldn't have been able to find.
I had a good friend of mine who I was talking to about this, and that's one of the things that he mentioned. He said that he and his wife had connected with some friends that they hadn't seen in a very long time, because they lived across the country. And he pointed out, he said, what's the difference between hanging out with them virtually, or when they're 3,000 miles away, versus somebody who's down the street? I mean, either way. It's still, it's still across the computer. It's still internet.
Yeah. So we've really been able to, we've been able to open up our borders, so to speak. We have also been able to really take a long, hard look at all the things that we were offering and find the gaps in what we were offering, and look to our partners in Greater Washington or North Carolina, or even 6 or so states got together in January and said, hey, let's combine all of our resources together and create an event that all of our members can go to, that, by using some of the best speakers in each state. And you actually were one of them, David.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you that didn't have the opportunity to attend that conference, that was a great conference. And Linda's probably going to have to help me out here on the states, all the states that were involved, but I believe Michigan was involved, Indiana,
Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Alabama, Georgia, and Virginia.
Yeah. So, and all of those states got together and they kind of did one conference for all of those members. And it was a great opportunity for collaboration where we typically would not see it, just because of distance and, just resources.
Yeah. One of the other benefits that we've really seen is the ability to be able to bring just-in-time content a whole lot faster. Because it's all virtual, we were able to turn around programs on things like PPP and the CARES Act and things like that in 2 weeks' time, which we normally wouldn't have been able to do if we were stuck doing it all in person, finding a hotel, marketing, blah, 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 all those things. And we've been able to really turn around content very quickly and respond to what members are needing. One of the things that we've done over this past year is we've really fortified what we're calling a roundtable series, and we have been able to bring in experts from all over the country to come in and talk. And we set up events so that members can talk with one another virtually, just like this, about the topic at hand, and it's been very successful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, so a lot of creative ideas, a lot of creative ways of
Mhm.
interacting that maybe just weren't available before.
Yeah.
What do you think though? I mean, because there is, and I've heard this from a lot of folks out there. A lot of the folks that I interact with on a day to day basis, they say, you know, the online stuff they got to do it, but it's
Yeah.
like they lose the camaraderie. And you touched on that. I mean, you know, just a few minutes ago, you
Mhm.
said that that's part of the reason why people attend events. I agree. I look forward when I go
Mhm.
to events to seeing the faces that I know I'm going to see, and
Yeah.
what would you say to that? I mean, is there? I mean, do you lose some connectiveness in a
Yeah.
sort of a strictly online world?
I think you do. I think you do lose some of the connectedness, but you can bring it back in a lot of different ways. We have found that with our events, we have chosen to do all live speakers so that we're not going to pre-record them and have questions come into the chat that the speaker can only respond to in the chat and not address in a live talk. We felt that that provided a lot more engagement than just a strictly chat interaction. But one of the things that we've also done is for some of our pre-recorded, we did have one set of pre-recorded programs, and we provided a live and timely instructor who would sit there and really push out questions to solicit answers and solicit engagement. And that was successful, and a lot of people really enjoyed that. There are so many different platforms out there, and there are so many different ways that you can view. So we have come up with an internal checklist. When we're developing a program, we'll look at that checklist and decide which platform would be best. Is it best to have breakout rooms where people are on camera and talking with one another? Or do we really strictly want to do a chat? Do we want to add in some gaming features or things like that? So we have all of these different things that we really talk about internally and try and accommodate as we move into the platform phase.
I think part of what I'm hearing from you is that part of the connectivity is maybe a little bit more reliant on the content itself when you don't have
Yes.
live events. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, content is really what is going to be the engagement, is what is going to help the engagement factor. If it's a really hot button topic or something that's really trending where people have a lot of questions, the engagement is going to soar through the roof because they need to have their questions answered just like they would in person. But
Sure.
if it's just an update topic where there might not be as many questions about it, then you're not going to see that kind of engagement unless you really, really pull it out of people, just like you would in person.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about branding because this is something that I think a lot of companies have struggled with when especially companies where they really sort of thrive on the experience of
Mhm.
sort of being there. I before
Yeah.
we hit the record button here, a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. We were talking about the restaurant industry a little bit. And, a restaurant really sort of thrives on this idea of experience. And I think, from some of the folks that have been involved in that industry that I've talked to, they've talked about how differentiating themselves has been tough because part of what the way that they differentiate themselves is through live events, through being there in
Mhm.
person, through being, eating in that establishment. Does branding become tougher when it's online only? I
Yeah.
mean, it would seem like it would, but I'm not sure. What would you say?
So I definitely agree with you there. When I first started thinking about branding, I think about, do people recognize us? Well,
Sure.
they recognize you for different things. Like they can recognize your color and your logo and the experience in person and that kind of thing. But what that equates to online is technology.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how is your experience with technology online? And there are so many factors that play into that it's so hard to control that. So, you know, then where you have to take that is how do you deal with those technology factors after the fact or after an event has happened. So we have really worked very hard to to make our technology seamless and work well. But if it doesn't, how do we handle it, and how do we communicate that to our attendee, to our member? Those kinds of things are very, very important. And that on top of that, it plays into the relationship that we have with our members and us connecting with our members. So it's all one big package.
Right. Right. I think that's very well said. And for those of you that are listening out there that maybe you've maybe struggled to connect with, either your client base or your stakeholders, how they interact with your technology, I think is pretty important. But that's not to say, though, that your technology is going to behave,
exactly
every single time.
Yeah.
But how you react to it, that can be controlled. I think that's part of what you just said. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is very fair. Technology is not always going to behave. And so we have really focused on our contingency plans and being able to communicate clearly, concisely, and timely with our attendees should something go wrong with the technology. We have really tried hard to provide them a lot of information up front so that they know what to expect. And then if that expectation is not met, we will over communicate with them to give them the next steps and how we're going to proceed next.
Yeah, because I mean, we can't necessarily control internet connections or our platforms necessarily, but when they do, when something does happen, to not just sort of leave the members in this case hanging, exactly. is an important piece. Yeah. I think that's important for companies to remember too. Especially if you're in kind of a service-based industry. The customer service side really doesn't change a whole lot. I mean, it's still about, trying to make sure that, the clients and the customers and the stakeholders really have what they need. I know that in my tax practice, especially over this past year, we've tried very hard to make sure that we are constantly sort of communicating with clients, whether that be via email or, reaching out to them with phone calls and things like that. Just because we weren't having the face-to-face meetings that we were used to having.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about a term that I've heard. I'm sure that you've heard here, and I've heard this from a lot of people. They keep saying to me, Dave, wait until it goes back to normal. Okay. Wait until it goes back to normal, as if there's going to be sort of this epiphany that's going to happen.
Switch.
Yeah, the magic switch, and the light's going to shine down, and the clouds are going to part, and and everything's going to be just the way that it was. What happens if it doesn't go back to normal? I mean, does the strategy have to change, or
Definitely.
I mean? I think it does too. Let's talk a little bit about that. How do companies have to change? How do organizations have to change?
Well, first off, let me say that I have been envisioning in my head that when the magic switch happens, that we're all going to come out of our houses like the Walking Dead. And, in my head, that's what I've been thinking. But I definitely think that our strategy to business has to change. In the past, we've always thought in person first.
Right.
And virtual was second. And that has to flip-flop. And we need to think virtual first. And how do we engage people virtually?
Right.
First and foremost. And then we think about how can we bring in the in-person attendee and make them feel part of the conversation with the virtual audience.
Right.
And, there are lots of different ideas floating around out there. There are lots of different strategies that people are talking about and using. But we're definitely looking at a virtual first strategy to continue to bring learning to members in the far southwest part of Virginia that we would normally not see, but we've seen more of them over the past year. So how can we continue that connection and that involvement with those members and those attendees?
Yeah, I personally wonder if there's going to be sort of a group of people that are going to prefer to do more of their, even when being back in person is a viable option and something that's being offered, that maybe they just don't want to do that. And I do wonder if you don't sort of, I don't know that it's ever going to go back completely to the way it was. I don't know. And
I don't feel like it will. I personally think that we're, in the past, our strategy has been, it's all about the in-person experience, and we would only stream one classroom at an event all day long. Well, that's not going to be acceptable going forward because people are so used to having those choices online. So we're looking at how can we accommodate at a conference that's a 3-day conference with 4 breakout tracks. How can we accommodate streaming all 4 of those breakout tracks at the same time and allowing our online attendee to choose what they want to go to, where in the past they've only had one choice.
Right.
We're looking at, if a speaker is not comfortable traveling, can we bring them into the entire conference virtually and stream them to even the in-person people, on a big screen with interactive tools and things like that. So we're looking at all of those options. So I really think that while there are some challenges, it is opening up our doors and our eyes to a new way of doing business.
Yeah, and for those of you that are in other industries, I mean, I think that this is, if you're working for an accounting firm or something like that, I mean, I think that this is relevant stuff here because I do think that I'll speak for my own practice. I think that some of my clients are going to prefer to continue doing Zoom meetings. Mm-hmm. If they don't, especially if, maybe leaving the house is harder or maybe they live a little bit further away, they may just not want to spend the time in the car, to come and see me.
I mean, think about the geography of Virginia and Northern Virginia. And you sit in traffic for an hour and a half to go into the office every day, or an hour and a half to travel from one side of Northern Virginia to another side to attend a conference. Well, you could utilize that time so differently if you could just attend an event online, or, living in far Southwest Virginia and you have to travel 3 hours to get to Roanoke to come to a small meeting where you could do it from your office. So I think some of those things, some of those attendees will never come back to in-person because they have found better uses of their time. And so we need to be good stewards of that and be able to bring them all the things that they still need virtually, as well as the person who's like, I really need human interaction, so I'm going to go in person.
We've talked a lot about engagements, today. I mean, because I think that that's where kind of all of this kind of fits in. Mm-hmm. is how do you keep folks engaged in a virtual environment where online is kind of, maybe the only option in some cases. Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of like tips and tricks, things that you've seen that have worked, maybe things that maybe you've seen that haven't worked in terms of just kind of maintaining engagement?
Yeah, I think that from the standpoint from the standpoint that we come at it is that you really have to have someone focused on technology, and then you have to have someone focused on engagement. So they can't be the same person. In the past, that's what we've done, and we've really lost a piece of that engagement. So we will be staffing all of our events with 2 people now, one who focuses on the technology and one who focuses on the engagement for the online attendee, to really make them feel welcome and comfortable, and to really pull out of them questions that they might have, but they're not sure how to engaged with the technology to do that.
So I think what I hear is a couple of things. One is that engagement partly is trying to sort of meet people where they are.
Yes, definitely.
So it's like I may have a client or a stakeholder in my business or for my organization, and their needs may not necessarily be the same as somebody who is maybe perfectly fine with jumping on a Zoom call or something like that, and that trying to just sort of every sort of a one approach show maybe isn't going to work. Is that fair to say?
I would definitely say that's fair to say. Not everyone is going to be able to come at technology at the same level. So being able to flex yourself to meet their needs at their level. And then the next level is being able to connect the online person and the in-person person. Yeah. And, we haven't had a lot of experience at that right now, but that's going to be our next focus, is how do we connect those folks as well?
Yeah, because there's always sort of been, and I'll speak about this from an instructor perspective and also from a participant perspective. There's always been a disconnect. It's like we have the people in the room, and maybe the speaker says, "And don't forget, to engage with us if you're online," and then that's about it.
And that's it. Yeah.
And there does seem to be there's like these two groups of people that are sort of that's an interesting one, is that dynamic and how to make that work.
We're going to crack that nut before the end of 2021.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. No, I think that's a great point. And a lot of this too, for those of you that that are out there that are listening to this, and your business really thrives on on customer service and kind of the service-based industries. This is it here, folks. I mean, it's still about good customer service. And I also think too that there is the fact that everybody is feeling, to some degree, has felt a bit isolated and a bit out of sorts, I guess, for lack of a better term, in the pandemic, and trying to sort of meet those people and see that that they're experiencing some of the same things that a lot of us are experiencing. I think has been I think it is an important takeaway.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100% there, David.
Yeah, I think too. I mean, I'll speak for this too. Anytime that I've ever reached out to clients or anything like that, they're always very happy that they've reached out. It's sort of that still that there's still some people out there and some familiarity out there. I think that has also been something I've noticed. I don't know if you've noticed similar things.
Definitely. We have a team of folks who are usually always answering the phones and things like that, and even when they're not seen in person, the CPE taker will recognize their voice, and they have struck up relationships with one another. So being able to continue that has been a big asset to us.
Well, I think, Linda, that you and I are just barely scratching the surface on this. I mean, I really do, because this is really, I think, one of the bigger business challenges right now. And, until we have that Walking Dead moment where everybody's sort of rising, out of the rubble, it's going to continue to be a challenge. So I think it's good to talk about it and try to share ideas and try to figure out, where the strategy needs to change.
Yes, I agree. I think one of the biggest things that we've learned over this past year, the biggest takeaway for me has been that whatever we have envisioned is not going to be 100% of what we do. Yeah. And that we are going to have to pivot because our members' needs are going to be slightly different. And we've kind of touched on that throughout, like we have to meet our members at whatever level they're at. Yeah. So we need to be able to pivot and to be able to accommodate all their needs at whatever level they're at.
Yeah, so I think that's great. And I hope that a lot of what we said here is helpful to the folks that are listening. Linda, if folks want to get a hold of you, how would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can reach me at the VSCPA.com. or they can shoot me an email at lnewsom-McCurdy@vscpa.com. And I'll be glad to talk with anyone.
There you go. So, well, Linda, thank you so much for being on the show today. I think this is a great topic, and I'm glad that we have a chance to talk about it together.
Great. Thanks, David. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks for listening to Accountable. Be sure to subscribe for more interviews and insights from today's business leaders. David Peters is a registered representative offering securities through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Carroll Financial Associates, a registered investment advisor. Peters Tax Preparation, David Peters Financial, Carroll Financial, and Cetera Advisor Networks are not affiliated. He is located at 1657 West Broad Street, Unit 5, Richmond, Virginia, 23220, and can be reached at 804-332-1373. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and not necessarily those of Cetera. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual.